Okay, this is a video about the X32 Compact Mixer. So we're going to take a look at the surface and just tell you what all the buttons do on the surface of the mixer here. Okay, before we start, I want to just talk a little bit about how Behringer does this and how they arrange things. So we will have 32 input channels, and they can either be microphones or quarter-inch tip-ring sleeve plugs, or balanced or unbalanced. You can actually use tip sleeve plugs if you wish. And then we'll also have 6 aux-in, which are tip ring sleeve plug-ins. Now, the way that they do it is that your input channels can be assigned to a bus, and we will have 16 buses available to us. So instead of having aux channels or subgroups, Behringer just simply calls those buses. So you can take groups of inputs and assign them to a bus channel. There are 16 different bus channels that can be assigned. A bus channel then would output to your left, right, or monitor or center main, or a bus channel can simply output what is on that bus. So that would be your aux channel. You could set that up for a number of microphones or whatever to go to a certain bus, and that bus would output, and that might be your monitor for your singers or your piano monitor. So the buses take the place of your aux outs. Buses can also be assigned to matrices. So we can have several buses going to a matrix, and there's a possibility for 6 matrices on this mixer. So if you had a separate room where you wanted to send a complete mix of what was going on in the main church, you could have like matrix 1 assigned to a separate room, and you could assign several buses to that matrix. So it could be like an additional left-right output or something like that you have, okay? And you can determine what buses output to those matrix and at what level. So it's very, very flexible as far as that's concerned. Okay, so let's just talk about the surface a little bit. So we have 8 motorized faders here, 8 motorized faders over here. On the left, we basically have our channels. So by pressing this button, we get channels 1 through 8, 9 through 16 if you press the second button, 17 through 24, 25 through 32. So I think that all makes sense there. Aux-in 1 through 6 and USB record. So we have 6 aux-in TRS plugs in the back that we can also bring things in through. And then 7 and 8, you can plug in a USB stick on this and record to the USB stick and then play back a stereo from that USB stick. And that's what this 7 and 8, if you press here, the USB record would appear here on 7 and 8 for a playback, which is nice for a really quick recording of a group that you're doing, and then do a playback real quick to let them hear how things sound. Effects return. So we have basically 8 stereo effects slots on this mixer, which actually gives you 16 channels of effects. Typically, stereo effects slots 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that would give you 8 channels. That's 4 times 2, so less stereos. Those are used for actual effects. And then effect slots 5, 6, 7, and 8 are typically used for graphic EQs. So these effects can either be put in line in a channel, so like an insert, so it goes in and out, or you can have a channel go into it and then feed back through here. And the purpose of that would be that you can actually decide when you want the effect to come online. If we're using it as an effect return, and let's say we have an effect couple channels going into effect 1. If we pull down our effects, the channel still goes in dry without the effect. If we push this up, then it brings our effect into the mix there too. So that's the reason for the effects returns on that side. Then we have buses 1 through 8 and 9 through 16. You also have buses 1 through 8 on this side and 9 through 16 on this side. I think the reason they do that is if you want to just bring up a display of your buses, you can do that. You can put buses 1 through 8 here and 9 through 16 over here, so you have a look at all your buses at the same time. Now there is a little feature, because this is the compact Behringer, you only get 16 mixers faders across plus your left right. Some people asked them if they could do something with allowing us to get 16 channels across. So there's a little secret here, and I don't even think they put this in the manual. If you press two of these buttons simultaneously, and it can be any combination of two, it will bring those up right across the mixer. So for example, if I press this 1 through 8 and 9 through 16, it will bring up channels 1 through 8 here and 9 through 16 here. Pretty cool. So, and a lot of people don't know about that trick, but it does work. So if you wanted to bring up your 16 channels displayed across there, you can do that by just simultaneously pressing any two of these buttons. As soon as you press one of these, that will take those channels off the right side here. Okay? So we've already said we can bring up buses 1 through 8 and buses 9 through 16 on this side. Your matrix and center or monitor. If you press that button, it brings up your 6 matrices, which I mentioned your buses would feed to the matrix, and you can have multiple buses feeding a single matrix. So it's a kind of a neat way to combine things there to feed other areas. We'll probably use that to feed the side speakers in the church. That way we can take multiple buses and have them feed the side speakers. And we can have the side speakers on individual matrices to control the volumes of those side speakers, and also to do some things like EQ them or put delays on them on each set of speakers in each pair of speakers as we move back in the church. Okay. DCA group 1 through 8. The DCAs are a digital controlled amplifier. You can use a DCA to control the volume of groups of channels. So it's not quite like a bus because it doesn't feed anything. It basically acts as a multiple volume control. So you can set up a DCA to control like all your handheld mics, and that would act as a kind of a master volume control for the handheld mics. And you could set up a DCA to be the master volume control for your instrument microphone, something like that. Again, it doesn't have an output. The DCAs don't do an output on their own. It's basically kind of like a remote control where you can control multiple fader volumes on channels at one time. Sometimes it's a handy thing. We'll show you how we'll actually be using that as we do have that set up. Okay, sends on faders button. This is kind of a neat feature that they have. So when you take a group of channels and you assign them to a bus, so let's say we took channels 1, 2, 3, 4 and assigned them to bus 1. Well, if I bring up my buses over here and I click select and then I clicked sends on faders over here, this shows me what faders are feeding into this bus. So I hit channels 1 through 8 and it would show me if any of channels 1 through 8 are feeding bus number 1 and at what level they're feeding, and if they are feeding at all. Maybe they're not feeding and I could select them to go ahead and feed bus 1. So this is a quick way to set up your feeds into buses. It's also a really quick way to adjust the volume. So let's say bus 4 is a monitor in the chorus area. I could select bus 4, hit sends on faders, and I can really quickly adjust all the different microphones that are fading into that or feeding into that monitor, rather than going individually channel by channel. And it just saves you a lot of time adjusting levels to the buses really quickly. It's a really neat feature. So okay, just make sure you unselect this when you go ahead and do your normal mixing, because if you forget, you're kind of pushing things around, and why things aren't happening is because you're actually working in sends on faders mode. The DAW remote we won't be using at all. This basically turns the entire board into a digital audio workstation controller. All right, let's look at some buttons down here. We have mute groups. You can assign groups of channels or buses to mute groups. So I can have channels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on mute group 1. Simply by pressing mute group 1, it would mute all those channels. So it's handy if you want to have a button to quickly mute multiple channels. And those are assignable. You just have to go through and assign them. We have assigned buttons here. The assigned buttons basically bring out certain features on the monitor, or on the mixer, excuse me, typically for bringing up certain screens up here. So say for instance that I have a graphic equalizer on my monitor output, and I don't want to go through all the sub-menus to find it, I can quickly assign that to a button. So as soon as I hit this button, that graphic equalizer would come up here on the screen, and then I would instantaneously be able to go ahead and make adjustments on it. So that's basically what those assign buttons are for, is to bring up certain items, whether it's an effects or a graphic equalizer, or even certain screens, meter screens, EQ, compression screens, or whatever I might want to have to deal with. It's a quick way for you to bring up a screen and access the screen real quickly, and then go ahead and adjust that without having to go through multiple menus. And again, that's assignable. You decide what you want to do, have each one bring up. Okay, so the screen up the top here. So this is not a touch screen. You use these knobs here, and they are push on and off contacts. So they click on and off to turn things off and on, and then they also turn to adjust. So for example, if we take a quick look here, the link setting is not on. If we push down on this, it would click, it would turn the link setting on. Twisting this, adjust gain. The gate is turned on here currently. If we press this again, it would turn off the gate feature. Pressing again turns the gate back on, and we adjust the threshold of the gate. So we're going to go through a separate video where we talk about all of these different buttons and what they do, what kind of screens they bring up, and what you can adjust. Just keep in mind that that's basically navigating around the screen. Notice that there are multiple tabs. It's kind of dark up here to see them, but there are multiple tabs. You navigate through the tabs by using these buttons, and then sometimes when you have a screen up, you'll see that there are two layers, an A and a B layer. You access the A and B layer by using these buttons here. But again, we'll talk about that in depth in another video. All right, so now let's take a look at the top left section of the mixer up here. So this basically acts as your strip, your channel strip. So since I've selected channel 1 down here, at least in this artist rendition they have, this is now everything that's affecting that particular channel. So let's take a look through and see. By the way, if a button is lit up, it means it's active. So 48 volt is lit up, so that means we are supplying phantom power to channel 1. This is a knob to turn to adjust your gain. You get a feeding up here for that. This is your low cut EQ, and this adjusts the frequency that low cut EQ is going to come in at. Also, you'll notice on all of these that we have view buttons. When you press the view button, right now we're getting an overall view. When you press the view button on any of these, it will bring up a more individualized screen that gives you a lot more fine detail about those particular parameters, and allows you to do a lot more control over parameters that you're accessing there. So this is meant to be more like your typical channel strip where you adjust things quickly, but you can get in and adjust things in detail using this screen later. So pressing that view button will bring up a different screen that's going to give you some more fine detail and control over that. Down here is our gate control. So the gate is engaged, and we decided the threshold that the gate is going to open up and let the sound come through. Our compressor is engaged, and threshold. Again, there's a lot more settings involved with the compressor. You can see those if you press the view button, and those would come up. Our EQ. So you basically have 4 parametric EQ here, and so you have a high mid, a low mid, and a low, which is more than a lot of analog mixers will give you. They typically give you like about 3 areas, but this will give you at 4. Your knobs adjust your Q, so this would be the width of the filter. This adjusts the frequency of the filter, where that's going to lie. This adjusts the gain of the filter. Okay, this shows us what kind of filter it is that we currently have engaged. If it's high cut, high shelf, variable EQ, paragraphic EQ, low shelf, low cut. And that'll show you what kind of filter that we currently have engaged when you press these different buttons in here. So that's a quick way. It's almost like your typically Q section on a board. Again, you select your different modes by pressing this. That changes the mode. It's just multiple select, click through, And the EQ tells us that the EQ is engaged, that it is affecting the channel. Again, if you want some more particular control, hit the view button over here. Our bus sends over here. This is our mono bus, and if we press this, it means we are outputting to mono. And if we press this one, it means we're going to be outputting to main left right. This is going to be your pan or balance control, and then this would be your level control up there as far as what this outputs to that main left right adjustment there. Up on the top, we have our USB input up here. The USB can be used for uploading data and setups into the mixer. So you can do, using a offline software, you can set up the entire mixer, record that to a USB stick, bring the USB stick in, plug it in, download that entire setup right into the mixer and have it completely set up for you. You can also use the USB stick to make stereo recordings, either or, whichever way you want to do that. So that's what that port is for. Phones level for your monitor phones. I forgot to mention this, but you'll see it says headphones. You'll see a little arrow here and a little arrow here. The headphone jacks, there are two handheld holes where you grab a hold to lift the mixer up. Inside those hand holes are the jacks for the monitor headphones. So you have one on each side. You can actually hook up two sets of headphones if you want to do that. Monitor level. So again, besides your headphone monitor, there are also outputs for speaker monitor. So if you were an engineer and you had your own set of little speakers, you could have the powered speakers, you could have those, and that would be what you use this to set the monitor level for there. TalkBack A, TalkBack B, you can have a microphone plugged into the mixing console, and then you can press TalkBack A and you can talk to the performers up on stage, and you can go in and select where your voice is coming out. Is it coming out through their monitors? Is it coming out through the main house? It's very selective. You can decide exactly where your voice is coming out of. It helps being able to talk to the people down front at the front of the church without having to yell from the back of the church once you have a microphone set up. And they use two different ones, and they can be latching or non-latching. So TalkBack, you could set TalkBack A just to be depress and release. TalkBack B can be latch, so you can press it, it would stay latched, so you can hold the microphone one hand and then adjust things with your left hand without having to hold onto the button, which is a nice feature there. Okay, I think I covered everything on the Surface. I'm also going to do a little video on connections, and then we'll have several videos talking about the screen up here and the different menus.